I'm now joined by Dr. Swaran Singh, Global Affairs expert and professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Singh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
A big historic day for India, for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, getting a consensus for the New Delhi Declaration and also getting the African Union a permanent seat at G20. Diplomatic high points for India.
Thank you for having me on your program. Today indeed is a historic day for India's changing stature and changing visibility at global scale. First of all, in the very first 10 minutes of the opening of a session, India was able to have African Union join as a 21st member and actually sit on the big table instantaneously, immediately, bringing to the table 55 African countries that are represented through African Union. Before that, of course, European Union is there, but they all represent 27 countries together.
Yes.
Usually, in such international gatherings, it takes time to accept who will be new member, how they will be inducted. And even when name is proposed, it takes little time that maybe in next summit, new member will join. But this was unprecedented in that sense. Second, even more unprecedented is the fact that usually in multilateral meetings like this, the final declaration usually has areas where there is tensions and challenges, and sometimes the last sessions have to be delayed and extended so that the consensus can be built and such declaration can be announced. In this case, at end of first session itself, India is able to announce the New Delhi Declaration. Not just that, this is more than twice the size of any earlier longer declarations mentioned in last 17 G20 meetings. It has 83 paragraphs, 93 attachments. And what is most significant is India's effort to bring in Global South to the center stage, in which case African Union joining is the first important structural change here. Now, what this means is that New Delhi Declaration being out of the way, having been announced, India now has time to start working on implementing some of the things on which consensus is built. And we saw already two major initiatives announced today itself. One is the biofuels, the International Biofuels Coalition. 11 countries have together announced it on the same platform. Second, of course, also is US, India, UAE and Saudi Arabia Economic Connectivity Network or Corridor, which is being also an agreement announced, where the railway lines and port developments will be done during with the four nations working together. So now in that sense, maybe, we know of 15 bilateral meetings in total sort of planned for Prime Minister to have with multiple leaders. It began with Prime Minister of Bangladesh yesterday. And many of these are also going to lead to some agreements being signed or some general understanding being developed, some kind of a mutual sort of partnership being thought of in terms of future. So this gives India enough time. And as you mentioned yourself, India's presidency continues till end of November. So India still has time to ensure that agreements that are agreed upon here, the joint declaration, New Delhi Declaration on which consensus is built on multiple issues, they are able to be carried forward. And of course, given the 𝗡𝗢𝗥𝗧𝗛𝗘 model of G20 leadership, now G21 leadership, India, Brazil and South Africa will be working together for the next year as Brazil becomes the next presidency of G21. So I think it is in that sense, in many ways, a lot of novelty, a lot of new things brought into how India has conducted itself and how India has been able to achieve so much in just first day of the summit meeting.
Sir, now India at the global high table, the biggest global South push under India's presidency. What is next for India as a global leader? Where do you see India next? What can India do in the global stage?
I think some of the things that will flow from here in continuation of the increasing recognition of India's global stature is that in November, we are having this APEC meeting in San Francisco, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting. India for several years had been, proposed by many as possible next member of APEC. It hasn't happened so far. So let's see, Prime Minister will be going to US perhaps to attend the APEC meeting in November 15, 16 in San Francisco. That would be another next big international event where India will be present. Indeed, we are also now reading possibilities of India hosting the next quadrilateral security framework involving national leaders of Japan, Australia, and the United States. And perhaps they will be invited as chief guests for the next Republic Day on 26th of January in New Delhi.
Right.
That could be another big event to showcase India's transformed new levels of acceptance, levels of partnership, and the fact that India has just recently, on eve of G21 meeting, launched Chandrayaan-3 and followed by Aditya L1.
Yes.
Also is projecting India as a advanced technology powerhouse in that sense, and is accruing several new partnerships with many of these nations. And therefore, I think this becomes an important inflection point that world's 20 most important economies and their national leaders or chiefs or several other international organizations, special invitees and so on, in total about 43 important leaders of the world sitting on one table in New Delhi, working together under India's presidency, was a great opportunity for India to showcase the new transformed India and how India wants to engage with the rest of the world. And I think let us see how much more we might see happening tonight and tomorrow.
Yes.
Because now the New Delhi declaration being out of the way, Indian leadership has time to sort of think of new things and what more can be achieved while all these leaders are still in Delhi. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Sir, before I let you go, all these things happened in the absence of the Russian President Putin and China's Xi Jinping. So how do you look at all of these things? Because China has been playing spoil sport, kind of playing tough. So how do you look at this development?
I think any successful international gathering, the way G21 has deliberations today and outcomes today, missing such an event is naturally a loss for any international leader if they were supposed to be here and could not be. Russian president not being here is relatively understandable because not only that Russia is involved in Ukraine crisis right now, but also the fact that International Criminal Court has issued that warrant for his arrest. And therefore, understandably, he did not join either the G20 Summit last year in Bali or the BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, and likewise in New Delhi. I think there are a lot of speculations as to why President Xi Jinping of China did not join, whereas particularly he was there only 10 days before he was there in Johannesburg, and they were able to work together in that situation. And I think in that sense, such an important gathering and Xi Jinping not being there definitely is a loss for China. Of course, Chinese delegation is headed by Prime Minister, so it's not that China is there. It's part of the G20-21 deliberations right now. But for example, the whole world since pandemic is suddenly so conscious of China manufacturing 30% of the world's manufacturing, and so much concentration of production lines, supply lines is not something good. The whole world, at least the developed world, is debating about redesigning global supply chains, friendshoring, onshoring, and so on. America is beginning to focus on manufacturing semiconductors at home once again. So that kind of transition, and I think also general political concerns that US and many of its allies from Europe have about China, it would have provided great opportunity for President Xi Jinping to reconnect and maybe assuage, explain a lot of these issues and where some of these concerns can be sort of ameliorated. But more important also for India as a host, for example, imagine if President Putin and President Xi Jinping were able to come to New Delhi, then other than making great strides in the multilateral outcomes of the G20 or G21 deliberations, that would have also provided India opportunity to see that maybe bilaterals between Biden and Xi Jinping, even possibility of a bilateral between President Joe Biden and President Vladimir Putin. After all, in the foreign ministers meeting of G20, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Antony Blinken met, and they had a bilateral meeting during that time.
Right.
That kind of unusual India contribution to mitigating Ukraine crisis perhaps also will be missed at this time. But deliberations are going full speed ahead,
Right.
and therefore I wouldn't say that Indian delegation or Indian leadership have missed any moment where they have not been totally engaged in ensuring that the unusual, unprecedented outcomes one after another are able to be achieved. And it's a matter of pride in that sense for all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for joining me today evening, and looking forward for more glories for India in the world stage.